Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. Coming up on tonight's show. After 2 years of fighting, the warring Ethiopian government and Tigray forces have agreed to a truce. The critical breakthrough comes just over a week into talks in South Africa, marking a turning point in a conflict which has killed thousands and displaced millions. Elsewhere, Kenyan forces have been deployed to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, joining up with troops of the East African Community. All the while, the M23 rebel group continues its violent advances amidst deteriorating security in the eastern DRC. And one man hopes to make the plight of Senegalese migrants more visible as he rides his bike all the way from Paris to Dakar. We catch up with Bamba Ndiaye on his record Route of Thirst and Hope. Thanks again for joining us. The government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front have agreed to a permanent truce after marathon talks in South Africa. The negotiations headed by the African Union in Pretoria are the first peace talks to take place in over 2 years of fighting between the warring sides, which has left tens of thousands dead and millions displaced. Conflict broke out in November 2020 following a peace deal between Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the TPLF's sworn enemy Eritrea, with the TPLF then defying Addis Ababa by holding regional elections. France 24's Veriga Bahal unpacks the negotiations.
The beginning of a new dawn for Ethiopia. That's what the African Union called it on Wednesday, as they welcomed a truce between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray rebels.
Parties in the Ethiopian conflict have formally agreed to the cessation of hostilities, as well as to systematic, orderly, smooth, and coordinated disarmament.
The deal would also include the restoration of law, order and services, access to humanitarian supplies and the protection of civilians, and it's welcomed by the rebels.
We have made painful concessions because addressing the pains of our people is far more important than the kinds of concessions we have made. Yes, we have made concessions because we have to build trust, and we have to make sure that every one of us builds on that trust.
With this agreement, the African Union hopes to end a devastating 2-year war that began when the leaders of the rebel Tigrayan People's Liberation Front criticised the government for attempting to centralise power. Another disagreement was a peace treaty by Ethiopia and neighbouring Eritrea over disputed territory. And in response, the TPLF organised regional elections in September 2020, deemed illegal by government authorities. 2 months later, the first clashes broke out when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed ordered an offensive against the rebels, who were accused of attacking government army camps. After a 5-month ceasefire, the clashes resumed. Although the true toll of the conflict remains unknown, the UN estimates that the civil war has caused nearly 500,000 deaths, with over 2 million people displaced and widespread famine.
The United Nations and African Union have both praised the efforts of both sides in the negotiations. Kenya's President William Ruto on Wednesday officially deployed troops to eastern DRC, joining a regional force aimed to end decades of bloodshed. Set up in April, the force was deployed to fight back against more than 120 armed militia groups operating in the region. Recent advances by the M23 group in particular have left locals frustrated, with several thousand people demonstrating against the work of regional troops in the town of Bukavu on Wednesday. Our correspondent Viviana Wandera tells us now about what peacekeeping role Kenya hopes to add and how they plan to do it.
The Kenyan troops' first mission in the DRC will be to recapture the city of Bunagana, which was seized by M23 rebels in June this year. At the send-off ceremony in Nairobi, the troops were seen off with a word of prayer by President William Ruto, who said they were on a mission to protect humanity, and as neighbors, DRC's destiny is intertwined with Kenya's. Military officials in Nairobi declined to reveal the number of troops involved in the mission for security reasons. An advanced Kenyan unit had arrived in the DRC in September to help set up logistical support systems. Further fighting by the militia group in October prompted the United Nations peacekeeping mission to increase its security alert level and boost support for the Congolese army. The M23 rebels, a mostly Congolese group, resumed fighting in late 2021 after being dormant for years. The group accuses the DRC government of failing to honor an agreement to integrate some of its soldiers in the army. At the same time, Burundi's President Evariste Ndayishimiye, who is also the chairman of the East African Heads of State Summit, said that after consultation with his counterparts, the regional heads of defense forces will be meeting as soon as possible.
And that's Viviana Wandera joining us earlier from Nairobi, Kenya. Several winners of the Nobel Prize for Literature have urged world leaders to raise human rights issues as they visit Egypt for the COP27 climate conference. The 15 laureates sent a joint letter to various heads of state asking them to devote their agenda to the many thousands of political prisoners held in Egypt's jails. In particular, they've asked to raise the case of prominent imprisoned activist Alaa Abdel Fattah. The outspoken dissident and UK citizen has spent most of the past decade behind bars, having risen to prominence in the pro-democracy uprisings of 2011. A Paris court on Wednesday sentenced former Liberian rebel commander Kunti Kamara to life in jail over violence against civilians and being complicit in crimes against humanity. It marks France's first trial of a participant in Liberia's civil wars, where over 250,000 people were brutally killed. Kamara was found guilty of crimes against civilians between 1993 and 1994. Charges against the 47-year-old included violence against a teacher whose heart he reportedly ate, and failing to prevent soldiers under his command from repeatedly raping 2 teenage girls. Neglected and forgotten in the town of Arlit in northern Niger, former employees of uranium mining company Cominac have been complaining about their living conditions following the Akuta mine closure in 2021. Many feel uncompensated for decades of hard toil, but Cominac, a subsidiary of French multinational Orano, has called for patience. Our correspondent in Niger, Harold Gira, sent us this report.
A year and a half after Arlit's uranium mine of Akuta shut down, the housing estate where most of Cominac's employees lived is crumbling.
Le jour qu'il y aura un pépin, c'est ça le problème, parce que
les maisons commencent à tomber.
Les tôles commencent à tomber.
Certains endroits qui n'ont même pas, il n'y a pas d'eau. Des fois, on a même des problèmes d'eau. C'est
désolant quand même, c'est vraiment désolant. C'est ça la merde que vous voyez là-bas. Les moustiques, si tu n'as pas une moustiquaire, alors ton compte est bon. Voilà maintenant ce qui se passe. Les gens ne font que chercher des camions pour récupérer l'eau, la chiotte, tout. C'est ça les conséquences de la fermeture.
Qui a bouché ces égouts?
C'est la Cominac. C'est la Cominac.
Elle a hérité les monteurs.
Despite long negotiations between Niger's unions and the local representatives of Orano, many former employees are unhappy with their severance package. Nayusa Yakuba worked in the same mine for more than 20 years.
20 million CFA francs. I can survive for maybe 2 years. If I don't find a stable job, what am I going to do? Maybe you can buy a house, a car or a motorbike, but the money's quickly gone. Some have to sell their house and their car. 20 million is nothing. Life is expensive now.
Cominac's management calls for patience. Measures are being put into place to allow former employees to become homeowners.
We spoke to the Ministry of Urban Planning about allowing former workers to own property in Arlit if they wish to. We planned this for late December because of the long administrative process and all the different things that need to be checked.
Several miners also accuse Orano of maintaining unsafe working conditions and failing to provide sufficient medical care for workers. Cominac denies this. 2 years ago, 27 people filed a complaint after discovering they had been exposed to dangerous levels of uranium while working at Arlit's mine.
Bamba Ndiaye is on a mission. He's riding all the way from Paris to Dakar on his bicycle. He hopes to raise awareness on the dangers of illegal immigration for young Senegalese who make the perilous journey across the Sahara Desert and Mediterranean Sea before landing in Italy. Njai began his journey on September 17th on his self-titled Route of Thirst and Hope. He now aims to complete the 6,952-kilometer distance, which would make him the first Senegalese to do so. France 24's Sam Bradpiece managed to catch up with him close to his final destination in the port town of Saint Louis.
Bamba Njai's journey has taken him more than 40 days so far. After passing over mountains and through deserts on his bike, he's nearly reached the Senegalese capital of Dakar. Along the way, he's attracted bemused looks from bystanders and a large social media following. He hopes to use his new platform to push an important message, one close to his heart, about the dangers of illegal migration to Europe and climate change. Here's what he had to say earlier.
My message is not to tell young people not to go to Europe. I myself live in Europe, so I know what it is like to live there. My message to young Africans who want to come to live in Europe is to come legally. In these conditions, it is much easier to live in a country that you do not know. My second struggle is for the environment and sustainable development. It is only us, the young people, who can lead this fight and push things forward.
Bamba is expected to reach Dakar on Thursday, and he hopes to use footage shot on his smartphone for a documentary being made about his experience, about his journey.
And we wish Bamba all the best for that final stretch on Thursday to Dakar. Well, that's all the news on Africa we have for the moment, but please don't go anywhere. There's plenty coming up here on France 24. It's bye for now.